Christmas Eve had always been a time of warmth in our family. Soft lights, the crackle of the fireplace, and the scent of cinnamon and pine lingering in the air. But this year, things felt different. The snowfall outside was heavier than usual, pressing a muffling silence over the house. And there was the mirror. It arrived 2 weeks prior, an unrequested inheritance from Great-Uncle Silas, a relative none of us could recall meeting. Delivered in a plain wooden crate with a yellowed note that read, "It belongs to the family now. Handle with care." The mirror was an imposing piece, nearly as tall as I was, framed in tarnished silver carved with ornate floral patterns. It might have been beautiful once, but now it was a relic of neglect, its surface marred by jagged cracks spidering from one corner to the other. "No way that's going in the living room," I'd muttered when it arrived. But my mother, sentimental about all things family, insisted it stay. "It's history," she said. "We'll clean it up after Christmas." So we'd propped it against the hallway wall, its cracked face catching the light in disconcerting ways. By the time Christmas Eve arrived, the mirror had almost faded into the background of our holiday preparations. Almost. That evening, a sudden blizzard knocked out the power, plunging the house into darkness. We scrambled for candles, their flickering glow casting shifting shadows across the walls. As I carried a candelabra down the hallway, I felt the mirror draw my attention. It wasn't unusual to see flickers of movement in the glass. It was cracked, after all. But this time, something held my gaze. At first, I thought it was my reflection. But as I moved closer, I noticed the figure staring back wasn't quite right. It wasn't just the distortion from the cracks. My reflection stood too still, its lips curling into a faint, eerie grin I wasn't wearing. I froze. The house around me felt unnaturally quiet. Then the grin widened. "Hello," it mouthed, though no sound came through. The candles flickered violently, and for a moment, the hallway plunged into darkness. When the light steadied again, the reflection was gone. I told myself it was a trick of the light, a combination of candle flicker and fractured glass. But as the evening wore on, I found my thoughts circling back to the mirror. The blizzard outside had worsened, snow piling against the windows. The rest of the family was gathered in the living room, chatting in low voices. But I felt removed, like the warmth of their laughter couldn't quite reach me. I kept glancing toward the hallway, toward the mirror. "Why don't you sit with us?" my mother asked. "You're pale." "I'm fine," I lied, my voice tight. I wasn't fine. The whispers started around midnight, soft at first, like the wind curling under the eaves. I tried to ignore them, but they grew louder, insistent. My name. Over and over. I crept back to the hallway, every step feeling heavier than the last. The mirror loomed in the flickering candlelight, its surface darker now, as though the cracks had deepened. I wanted to turn back, but something compelled me forward, a pull I couldn't resist. When I was close enough to touch the glass, I stopped. The surface wasn't reflecting me anymore. Instead, I saw another room, a dim and twisted version of our own. The furniture was there, but warped and broken, draped in shadows that writhed like living things. Then I saw her. The twisted version of myself stood within that strange room, staring at me through the glass. Her features were wrong, too sharp, too hollow, her eyes glittering black like shards of obsidian. She raised a hand and placed it against the other side of the glass, beckoning me to do the same. "Come," she whispered, her voice an echo of mine but dripping with malice. "It's better here." My heart thundered in my chest as I stepped back, breaking the spell. The mirror seemed to pulse in the dim light, its surface rippling as though alive. I ran back to the living room, hoping for comfort, for normalcy. But when I arrived, the space had changed. The fireplace was cold, the Christmas tree bare, its ornaments scattered like fallen teeth. The room was empty. I was alone. Or so I thought. From the corner of my eye, I caught movement, a flicker of black in the periphery. The whispers returned, louder now, and as I turned, I realized they weren't coming from the mirror anymore. They were coming from inside the house. The house had become unrecognizable. Shadows stretched unnaturally long, crawling like living things across walls that seemed to pulse and breathe. The warm scents of cinnamon and pine had soured, replaced by the acrid tang of decay. My breath came in ragged gasps as I moved through the empty living room, searching for my family. "Mom!" I called, my voice cracking. "Dad? Anyone?" The silence pressed back like a suffocating weight. The whispering had grown louder, surrounding me now, coming from nowhere and everywhere at once. Words I couldn't quite make out, but their tone was unmistakable. Mocking, taunting. They knew me, those voices speaking directly to my fears. My heart seized as a familiar laugh echoed from the hallway. It was my own, but warped, dripping with malice. Slowly I turned, and there she was. The twisted version of myself stood at the edge of the hallway, her black eyes gleaming in the dim candlelight. She didn't move, just stared, her head tilting slightly as though studying me. "What do you want?" I croaked, backing away. Her grin widened, revealing teeth too sharp, too many. "This is yours," she said, her voice an uncanny echo of mine. She gestured toward the mirror, now looming at the far end of the hallway, its surface dark and rippling like water. "It's always been yours." I shook my head, stumbling backward. "No, this isn't real." "Isn't it?" she hissed, stepping closer. Her movements were jerky, wrong, like a marionette pulled by invisible strings. "You've ignored it for years, haven't you? Buried it, but it never left you." "I don't know what you're talking about." She laughed, a hollow, grating sound that echoed through the house. "Oh, but you do. You felt it the moment you touched the mirror. The truth. You're the one who brought me here." The whisper surged, a cacophony of voices that drowned out my thoughts. Images flooded my mind, moments I'd tried to forget, the lies I'd told, the mistakes I'd made, the people I'd hurt. My knees buckled and I fell to the floor, clutching my head. "Stop," I whispered. "Please, stop." But the voices didn't stop. They grew louder, more insistent, until I couldn't tell where they ended and my own thoughts began. When I looked up again, she was gone. The mirror, however, was not. It stood at the end of the hallway, its surface glowing faintly, beckoning me. I don't remember deciding to walk toward the mirror, only that my feet carried me there as if drawn by an invisible thread. The hallway seemed to stretch impossibly long, the air growing colder with every step. The rippling surface of the mirror shimmered like liquid silver, and for a moment I thought I saw faces, hundreds of them, twisting and screaming beneath the cracks. My reflection wasn't there anymore. Instead, the dark, twisted world beyond the glass loomed larger, clearer, the warped furniture, the writhing shadows, and at the center of it all stood her. She watched me with those black, unblinking eyes, her grin stretching impossibly wide. In her hand was a key, identical to the brass one that had come with the mirror. She held it up, turning it slowly in the air. "This is the way out," she said, her voice silky and mocking. "But it's not for you. Not unless you take it." "How?" I demanded, my voice trembling. "Come inside." I shook my head, taking a step back, but the hallway had disappeared. The walls and floor around me were gone, replaced by an endless void. The only solid thing was the mirror, its frame glowing faintly in the dark. I was trapped. "No," I whispered. "This isn't real." Her laughter echoed, cold and sharp. "You keep saying that, but you're here, aren't you? And here I make the rules." The mirror pulsed, and I felt a sharp tug in my chest, as if something inside me was being pulled toward it. My body felt heavy, my limbs sluggish, and I dropped to my knees. "You can't run from this," she said, stepping closer until her face filled the glass. "You never could." Desperate, I remembered the brass key. I fumbled in my pocket and pulled it out, its cold weight grounding me. Her eyes narrowed, her grin faltering for the first time. "What's that?" she hissed, her voice sharp with anger. "This is mine," I said, clutching the key tightly. I didn't know what to do with it, but I felt its power, a flicker of defiance against the suffocating darkness. "No!" she shrieked, slamming her hands against the inside of the glass. Cracks spread from her touch, spiderwebbing across the surface. "You can't leave! You belong here!" Summoning every ounce of strength, I lunged forward and pressed the key against the glass. The mirror screamed, a high-pitched, shattering wail that shook the ground beneath me. The cracks spread faster, deeper, until the entire surface exploded in a shower of silver shards. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then I woke on the cold floor of the hallway, the mirror's shattered remains scattered around me. The house was warm again, the lights flickering back on. But as I stared at the largest fragment of glass, I saw her face one last time, grinning. "I'll be waiting," she whispered before fading into the darkness. I stayed on the cold hallway floor for what felt like hours, too afraid to move, too terrified to look away from the shattered remnants of the mirror. The air was heavy with silence now, broken only by the faint crackle of the restored power in the overhead lights. My family found me eventually. They laughed nervously at my disheveled state, brushing it off as a bad fall or stress. "You're pushing yourself too hard," my mother said, her brow furrowed as she helped me to my feet. I didn't tell them what had happened. How could I? They wouldn't believe me. But the mirror was gone, or at least most of it was. My parents swept up the shards that night, dumping them into a garbage bag as if disposing of any other broken trinket. Yet I couldn't shake the feeling that we'd made a mistake. I kept one shard. I don't know why. It was small, no larger than my palm, its edges jagged and dangerous. I told myself it was to prove to myself that it had all been real, that I wasn't losing my mind. But deep down, I knew the truth. I couldn't let it go. The days passed, and the house returned to normal, or so it seemed. But the shard, it lingered. I hid it in a drawer, but I could feel its presence, humming faintly like a distant heartbeat. At night, I would dream of the mirror world, the writhing shadows, the warped furniture, and her. Always her. She would stand at the edge of my vision, her black eyes watching, her two sharp teeth glinting in the dark. "You can't hide forever," she whispered in those dreams. "You broke the glass, but I'm still here." One night I woke to find the shard on my bedside table, gleaming faintly in the moonlight. My heart froze. I had locked it away. I stared at it for hours, afraid to touch it, afraid not to. When dawn broke, I forced myself to throw it into the garbage outside. But as I walked back inside, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd made another mistake. The shard was back in my drawer that evening. The air around it feels colder now. Sometimes I catch faint whispers coming from it, too soft to make out. And every so often, when I glance at its fractured surface, I see her, still waiting. The mirror may be gone, but its shadow remains. And I know, deep in my bones, that one day it will come for me again.